Now you have worldwide a younger demographics, to use that term, of people who are interested in a broad range of art. If you look at the websites and the advertisement of the big auction houses, you can see that all sorts of collectibles step in. Watches, sneakers, anything that is unique in a way will attract this young generation. They don't draw the same lines between the sectors of the art market.
Younger collectors, defined as individuals aged 36 or younger, are taking an online-first approach to discovering and collecting art. Some 82% of this demographic have reportedly purchased art online. Art appreciation is evolving, as our next conversation highlights. Hello, Page Points listeners. Today we have joining us the co-editors of the book entitled The Art Collecting Legal Handbook, and it's in its third edition. We have joining us Bruno Boesch and Massimo Sterpi. I'd like to say welcome to you both to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's begin our conversation by a definition of what is meant by art to you. And is it limited to just physical works, or do you also address digital technologies as well?
Actually, we started from a wide definition of art. It has to cover different jurisdictions. And these can, in certain countries, encompass a list of items, and in others, just be a very open definition. So art is certainly visual arts, and let's say this is, as the title say, a collector's book. So clearly, we refer to art that can be collected, not necessarily physical, because as our most recent edition show, art has been more and more, let's say, dematerialized. And in recent years, there have been many examples of artwork that have no physical, let's say, embodiment, but nevertheless were collectible. So art can be collected is probably the focus of the book.
Yeah, could I perhaps make two comments to that? I like very much the definition of art, saying that art is what you call art. And that's really what we deal with in this book. And if you look at the list of jurisdictions, some jurisdictions are more particularly concerned with archaeology. I would say it's cultural property in the broad sense that the book deals with.
You mentioned jurisdictions. Could you outline how many are included?
It's between 25 and 29 across the different editions of the book.
And here again, if I may, one comment regarding these many jurisdictions. There's a great variety of jurisdictions. We also paid attention to the fact that, yes, we provide information in response to a set of questions where we follow the work from the inception to the eventual gifting, for instance, or even disappearance. But we did that paying attention to the fact that in these countries, cultural property is dealt with not only in different ways, but with different sensitivities. The concept of cultural property in a trade country, in Holland, in Switzerland, is very different from what it is in Italy, Greece, Egypt, or Iran. And we were trying and we achieved to get that through the voice of the contributor. So we did heavy editing to make sense of it, but we tried to keep the original voice of the country.
Yeah, exactly. What Bruno said is very important. We covered with a lot of attention both what are called source countries and what are called market countries, because they have completely different needs, completely attitude, and many times completely different rules. Because of course, the market country make it as easy as possible to put in and out artwork, whereas the source country are normally very strict in allowing certain pieces to go abroad, and at that point, even strict in allowing things to go in. So yeah, we had a variety of attitude that is, however, perfectly covered by the breadth of the number of countries that we were able to cover in this book.
Massimo is, I think, putting the finger on something which I find important. Art and cultural property for a long time has been almost the last bastion, the last soldier standing for trade. Art has moved enormously, more than anything else, and it was the last field in which barriers were rising. Today, it's fair to say that some barriers are rising. And you might say understandably, because countries are increasingly concerned about the meaning of their heritage for their identity. So they protect it.
You notice that in the last years, there has been this big movement for a decolonialization and return of pieces, sometime or many times even beyond what the law said, because this emergence of a new sensibility created a lot of issues because demand were not supported by the existing law. Same happened before with looted works that generated a number of solutions that were not within the existing law, but like innovative solution and international treaties and things, or ways to create a new international customary rule that is beyond, by the way, what emerges. This is something that I think is important to share with you, that a book like ours, which is the first of its kind, because there were comparative books on certain aspects of art, to make an example about the taxation of art. But there was no book that was able to cover so many aspects about art law in so many countries. And by the way, our book can become a point of reference also to understand whether international customary rules are being created, because you can see if certain rules repeat themselves in several countries. And they can be evidence of an existing international de facto convention or a customary rule, which is very important. I think that's an interesting contribution that we made to the field.
There's indeed a growing body of understanding regarding how cultural property is dealt with, both between institutions in different countries and between private persons. May I briefly come back, because we may not get a chance to do that later on the matter of repatriation or restitution. On technology, yesterday I attended a fascinating conference by the International Catalogue Raisonné Association, where we talked about the digital Benin project, which is a very advanced project about recording the various items that were plundered at the end of the 19th century. And we can see there how people from around the world congregate to develop up-to-date, workable practices. You should really have a look at their website, Digital Benin. It's one of the most advanced websites in that field, and it reflects a level of understanding which just runs ahead of the law.
What would you say is the most important change affecting the art market that has happened since the last edition of this book?
I think was certainly the impact of technology on both the kind of works that were being traded, the emergence of not the emergence of digital art per se, because digital art has been around for decades, but the emergence of digital art as a sellable product, as a market product, in combination with the NFT, even if it was a sort of a big peak followed by a big fall, almost a fad, but certainly something remained. That's about the type of work being traded. But on the other hand, it's certainly a different word, because nowadays people tend to buy art remotely, which was practically unheard of or very, very rare, very limited before COVID. Now people is used to check works remotely, to see them from any angle. Galleries can show works remotely. So there is a different attitude where remoteness is part of the game. And not necessarily you have to have the work in front of you before buying it. So that's a big difference. Also, escrow system that are created through digital platforms like remote bidding and all sort of things, including other elements impacting on the trade, like tokenization of artwork, so that you can buy a digital token that represents a quota of the value of the work. So the work are more or less the same they used to be. Nowadays, the last probably big wave is impact of artificial intelligence and the creation of many, many works where artificial intelligence has a role. And that is still in a very gray area, is still a bit undecided whether works created by or with the strong help of AI may be protected by copyright. And of course, this has an impact on their value, because if they are freely replicable, clearly they have less value. If there is a copyright that is recognized, at least to the human that mostly contributed to their creation, they are sort of legal monopolies, and that increase their value.
Massimo, don't you think it would be right to distinguish, as far as technology, the impact of technology is concerned, the impact in the art market and the impact in the art world? I think rightly you say that the art market has been heavily impacted. We have data banks on prices today that did not exist only a few years ago. These tools have allowed people to trade remotely. Auction houses, galleries use platforms for the sale of works of art remotely, and they work extremely well. Though when you look at the overall figures, it's still only a fraction of the volume, the turnover of the art market. But there is a change of demographics, which of course impacts the habits. And young people don't have the same issues with working remotely. And you can witness that only recently. I remember attending a Christie's sale here in London, when you could see that impact. How did you see it? Because the auctioneer was clearly dealing with the room in the traditional way, the people on the phone, which there are more and more of them on the phones on the side of the room, and the third audience was the people online. And if it's senior enough, the auctioneer would be perfectly comfortable even addressing openly in front of the room the people online and saying, you in Illinois, 10,000 against you, and then moving towards the room, etc. So the remote dealing is moving actively. But I think more significantly even, technology is impacting the art world, and not just the art market. We see that in immersive exhibitions. We have not only all of these happening in the Vera Museum with the immersive exhibitions, which now even go beyond what they used to be. You are provided with virtual reality headsets. Then exhibitions, yes, it steps in on restitution as well. When you look at the Museum of Looted Antiquities, it's an extraordinary database that they have developed of more than 850 repatriation cases involving nearly 1 million items.
You have mentioned the art market and you mentioned the art world. How does this all affect the artists? Has this transformation or maybe expansion to the digital environment positively affected the artists?
Let's say that I often use this sentence when I open my conference about art law, that art is the research and development department of the humanity. So to say that artists are normally early adopters of new technologies because they are curious and they are very fond of innovation. And in fact, no surprise that many of the big artists embraced the new technologies, like Daniels that made a big project on blockchain, or a very famous artist that embraced AI. And nowadays, I would say AI is the new Photoshop. Every artist using a computer is now experimenting AI. They use AI as an assistant, basically, as a sophisticated assistant. By the way, all these myth around AI and its capacity to create is more hype than reality, because if you ask artificial intelligence with simple prompts to create an image of something, the image is super banal, really low quality. Whereas artists are able, with multiple prompts, addition and things, and the source material to be crunched then by the AI, to direct the AI to do what they do. So I see more and more of a symbiotic relationship between technology and artist. Certainly, on the other hand, there is an undeniable impact on certain kind of creative works that are going to be more and more done. I'm thinking about commercial music, for instance, certainly not the big composer, not Beethoven, but the typical music that you hear as the background of a commercial video or a slideshow of your photo. This kind of music is now composed at very good level by artificial intelligence, or simple images or a new version of a logo can be elaborated by artificial intelligence. So certainly there could be some substitution. So let's say a lower level of creativity like decoration or this kind of very simple creativity is certainly going to be severely impacted. High level, I wouldn't be so much fearful. People will not spend millions into something developed by a machine or primarily by a machine, or at least they still evaluate much more the man behind the machine.
A last question to take advantage of the wealth of knowledge that you both have. I don't know what the correct time period would be because I'm thinking about what do you think will happen with the art market in the coming 5 years? How do you feel like for the next edition of the book? What do you think might happen?
Technology has already had a very strong impact in the last 5 years. I think it's a bit more unlikely that it will have another so big impact. Also because the emerging technologies that I see, even like quantum computing, for instance, or this kind of thing, will just accelerate what is possible now. On the other hand, I think there will be more politics in the frame. Politics meaning this idea of everything that has to be repatriated, which I believe it's a bit against history, because artworks have always circulated around the world. And the idea that we deny the rest of history and want everything back home, which, by the way, risks to make every country very provincial, because if you just have your own stuff, what's your exposure? So I do not believe that's necessarily a good, let's say, evolution, but I think it will be an evolution. So I expect more treaty on recovery of goods, more treaties about archaeology and cultural goods, even in countries that do not have that. I know I've even participated in the reformation of certain laws of certain emerging countries concerning the protection of cultural goods. And now there will be also, for instance, a new law that is already in force, but that is progressively entering in force about limitation to import of artworks into the European Union. So we want that everything entering the European Union must be clean, traced. We should know where it comes from, how it was exported, and everything, which is basically impossible in the end. And then you have other laws applying, like anti-money laundering, that applies expressly to the art market. So I see many laws that are impacting the art world and not necessarily making the circulation of art easier or more effective. So that's what I expect. More regulation to come from different angles, especially from the cultural goods, the tax, and let's say regulatory angles.
Yes, Lisa, if I may. Often you read that the art market is unregulated, as just pointed out by Massimo. It is not. In many ways, it is very regulated. It is increasingly regulated. But still, you can read about this myth of an unregulated market. This is just a misconception. What I'd like to make, perhaps by way of an additional comment on collecting, more than the art world in the broader sense as dealt with by Massimo, I think there's a generational shift in collecting going on. And there's a change of guard. And the people who used to collect, they started probably early 20th century. People who used to collect impressionists, then modern, and then contemporary art. This is a generation that is waning. This is the generation of Massimo and me. Now you have worldwide a younger demographics, to use that term, of people who are interested in a broad range of art. If you look at the websites and the advertisement of the big auction houses, you can see that all sorts of collectibles step in. Watches, sneakers, anything that is unique in a way will attract this young generation. They don't draw the same lines between the sectors of the art market. And we have to watch out for them. And it may have an impact on museums and institutions, of course, because they have no reason to be faithful. In the same way as they shift platforms when they buy, they don't have any loyalty to institutions. And the collectors, I was referring to the European and North American classical collectors, they had a relationship to the big institutions. So the big institutions are equally adjusting to a new world of collecting and enjoying art.
Thank you to you both. I will have your words resonating in my mind as I read about shifts in the collections and those who collect art. We really encourage the collectors and the researchers of the art world to take a good look at this very comprehensive edition.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Massimo.
I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Massimo and Bruno. The third edition of the book, the Art Collecting Legal Handbook, is available for consultation in our knowledge repository at the WIPO Knowledge Center. Until next time and the next page points, bye for now.